The man with tired eyes. The rain fell gently on the streets of New York City. The sky was gray. The wind was cold, and people hurried down the sidewalks, holding umbrellas or tightening their jackets, inside a small, warm cafe on Fifth Avenue. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air. It was crowded, filled with noise, cups clinking, people laughing, soft jazz music playing in the background. Sarah sat alone at a corner table, her laptop open but untouched. She wore a simple sweater and jeans. Her brown hair was tied up loosely, and her tired eyes stared out the foggy window. She had come to the cafe to write, but her mind was blank. Life had been difficult lately. She had lost her job 2 weeks ago. Her rent was due, and today was the anniversary of her mother's death. As the door opened again, a tall man stepped in from the rain. He wore a black beanie, a dark coat, and a beard. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. His eyes searched the cafe. Every seat was taken. The barista behind the counter smiled politely. "Sorry, sir, we're full right now." The man nodded, quietly accepting the news. He didn't argue or ask again. Instead, he turned, ready to leave. Sarah watched him. Something about him felt different. Maybe it was the calm in his movements. Maybe it was the way he looked at the people around him, not with judgment or frustration, but with quiet understanding. She didn't know who he was. She had no idea. "You can sit here," she heard herself say, surprising even herself. The man looked over, his expression softening. He walked to her table and gave a gentle nod. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm but low. They sat across from each other in silence. Sarah closed her laptop. The man placed a small, worn-out book on the table. It looked like something he had carried for years. The pages were yellow. The cover was torn. Sarah smiled slightly, her curiosity growing. "You read often?" she asked. He nodded. "It helps." "With what?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then, with a half smile, he said, "Everything." Sarah didn't press further. She knew that kind of pain. The kind you don't explain. The kind that stays quiet inside your chest. A few minutes passed. He sipped a coffee that he had somehow managed to order without her noticing. Sarah picked at her muffin, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she had spoken to someone new. "Do you come here often?" he asked. "Only when life feels too heavy," she answered honestly. He nodded again, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Then maybe today is one of those days." She looked at him, a bit surprised. "How'd you know?" "Your eyes," he said softly. "They carry stories." Sarah felt something shift in her. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was something quieter, something deeper, like someone had just seen her for the first time in weeks. She looked back at him. "What about you? Why are you out in this rain, looking like you've walked for hours?" He paused. Then he said, "Sometimes I just need to be among strangers." There was a silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. A woman at the next table whispered to her friend, "Is that?" "No, it can't be." But neither Sarah nor the man heard her. They were locked in something gentle, something still. Eventually, Sarah leaned back and smiled. "I'm Sarah." He hesitated, then said, "Call me Keanu." She raised her eyebrows. "Like the actor?" He smiled a little. "Like the actor." But still, she didn't know. They sat together for over an hour, talking, not talking, sharing. Silence like it was a warm blanket. When he stood to leave, he looked at her with a kind of gratitude that felt almost holy. "Thank you," he said again. "For the seat, for the space." She smiled. "Any time." As he walked out into the rain, she watched him go. Only later, hours later, when she got home and opened her phone, did she understand who he really was. It wasn't just a kind man with tired eyes. It was Keanu Reeves. But by then, the story had already started, one that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. And all because she had said 5 simple words. "You can sit here, sir." The phone call that changed her life. Sarah sat on her couch, the soft light of her apartment warming the room as night crept in. She was curled up in a blanket, her tea growing cold on the side table. Her laptop sat open beside her, the cursor blinking on an empty page, but her mind was far from writing. She kept thinking about the man from the Cafe acute. Keanu. There was something in his voice, Something in his presence that stayed with her. Not in a romantic way, not yet. It was something more grounded, like a quiet reminder that kindness still existed in the world. On impulse, she opened her phone and searched his name, Keanu. And there he was, movie star, Hollywood legend, a name and face known around the world. She blinked, her heart skipping. No way, she whispered. She stared at the pictures. It was him, same eyes, same beard, same gentle smile. Did I just have coffee with Keanu Reeves? 100 thoughts rushed into her mind. Did he know she didn't recognize him? Did he care? Why was he alone in that cafe, reading a torn book and walking through the rain like a man who had lost something? She shook her head and laughed to herself. What are the chances? Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend Maya. Wanna come over tomorrow? I made lasagna. Sarah smiled and typed back, sure, but wait till you hear about who sat at my table today. The next morning, Sarah returned to the cafe acute. Not because she expected him to be there again, but because something inside her wanted to feel that calm again, the one she felt when she talked to him. It had been so long since she felt seen without needing to explain herself. She ordered a cappuccino and sat at the same table. The air smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans. A few minutes later, the bell above the cafe door rang. And there he was. He wore the same coat, the same beanie, but this time, his eyes searched less and landed on her. He walked over, quiet and kind as before. May I? He asked. She smiled and nodded. I was hoping you'd come back. He sat down slowly, placing that same old book on the table again. They didn't talk right away, but the silence felt like a conversation. Finally, she spoke. I Googled you. He smiled gently, almost shyly. I thought you might. I didn't recognize you yesterday. I know, that's why I stayed. She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. Sometimes it's nice to be with someone who doesn't expect anything from me. Someone who doesn't look at me like I'm anything more than human. Sarah nodded, slowly understanding. You wanted to be invisible. No. He said, I wanted to be real. Those words hit her like a quiet wave. She suddenly realized how heavy it must be to be famous. To have strangers admire you, but not really know you. To live in a world where most people want something from you. Well, she said, I didn't want anything, except maybe someone to share a table with. He looked at her with the softest expression she had ever seen. And that meant more than you know. Later that day, after Keanu left with a soft wave and a promise to return soon, Sarah went to Maya's place. The lasagna was hot, the laughter was easy, and the evening felt like home. But the moment she mentioned Keanu, Maya dropped her fork. You're joking. I swear, Sarah said. He just sat at my table, and we talked, like, really talked. Maya leaned forward, her eyes wide. You have to tell someone. This is crazy. I'm not telling anyone, Sarah said firmly. He trusted me. I'm not going to ruin that. Maya nodded slowly. You're right. But Sarah, do you know what this could mean? Sarah didn't answer, because deep down, something was changing. Something she didn't understand yet. Not fame. Not attention, but a feeling that this meeting wasn't an accident, that maybe, just maybe, something bigger was at play. 2 days passed. Sarah returned to the cafe again, this time with her laptop open, actually writing. Keanu walked in, just like before, quiet, calm, unannounced. Writing today? He asked as he sat down. Trying to, she said. He smiled. Need inspiration? I think I already found some, she replied, looking up at him. They talked about everything. Books, grief, laughter, childhood memories, the kind of talks that last hours but feel like minutes. Then, as the sun began to set, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned gently, then stood up. I have to go, he said. But I want you to meet someone, if you're okay with that. Sarah blinked. Meet someone? He handed her a small card. No number, no address, just a handwritten note. Saturday, 7 p.m. Trust me. She looked up at him. Where? I'll send a car. Then he left, just like that. Sarah stared at the card, heart pounding. Something was happening, and she had no idea what waited for her on Saturday night. but deep down, she knew one thing: everything in her life was about to change. Saturday at 7. Saturday arrived like a whisper. Sarah stood in front of her mirror, staring at herself for too long. She had changed outfits 3 times. Her hands were shaky. Her stomach was a knot of nerves. She still didn't know what this was. Was it a date? Was it a meeting? Was she walking into something she didn't understand? The little card lay on her table. Saturday, 7 p.m. Trust me. His words played again and again in her head. At exactly 6:45, a black car pulled up in front of her building. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. The driver stepped out, holding a small sign with her name. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The city moved outside the window, but her mind was somewhere else. After 30 minutes, the car stopped in front of a quiet building. Not a restaurant, not a hotel. A community theater. She blinked, confused. The driver opened her door, nodded politely, and said, "He's inside, miss, inside." The smell of old curtains and wooden floors filled the air. Soft lights hung above. The space was small, intimate, like a hidden pocket of peace in a noisy world. Keanu was standing by the stage, dressed simply, hands in his coat pockets. He smiled when he saw her. "You came," he said. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "I was scared." "Of what?" "Of not knowing what this is." He looked at her gently. "It's not anything yet. Just a moment." He walked her toward the front row. She sat. He sat beside her. And then the lights dimmed. A group of kids, maybe 10, maybe 12 years old, stepped onto the stage. They wore secondhand costumes and held shaky scripts, but when they began to speak, the room transformed. It was a play, not professional, not polished. But it was full of heart. The kids told a story about loss, about love, about friendship, and in their small voices, Sarah heard something big. Something real. As the final scene ended, the room went quiet. Then applause filled the space. Not from a crowd, only from her and Keanu. He stood and clapped like he was at the biggest premiere of his life. When the lights came on, the children bowed. They smiled when they saw him. One of the girls ran over and hugged Keanu tightly. "Did you like it?" "I loved it," he said, his voice full of warmth. Sarah watched, amazed. He turned to her. "This is a shelter program I support, for kids who've been through too much too young. Every Saturday, they get to become someone else." For a little while, Sarah felt her throat tighten. That was beautiful. He looked at her. "I wanted you to see what matters to me." She didn't know what to say. Then he handed her something. A folded piece of paper. "You once said your mind was blank when you tried to write. Maybe this will help." She unfolded it. It was a letter. Not typed. Written by hand. It was a letter from his sister. A story about their childhood, their struggles, the nights they went hungry, the dreams they used to whisper to each other when they couldn't sleep. At the bottom, it said, "He never stopped believing in people, not even when they gave up on him." Sarah looked up, tears quietly forming. "You trust me with this?" she asked. "I don't trust many people," he said, "but something about you feels safe." After the kids left, Keanu walked her outside. The air was cool. The stars were faint, hidden behind city lights. They sat on the steps of the theater, not speaking much. Finally, she asked, "Why me?" He smiled. "Because you didn't know who I was. And still, you let me stay. That means something." Sarah looked down. "I'm nobody." "Keanu." "No," he said. "You're someone who saw a tired man and gave him a seat. You're someone who listened without asking for anything. That's rare." She didn't reply. Her heart was too full. He stood and offered his hand. "Let me walk you to the car." As they reached the car, he paused. "Can I see you again?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, same cafe, same table." He smiled. "I'll be there." As the car drove her home, Sarah stared out the window, lost in thought. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't know what this was turning into. But something in her heart whispered, "You're exactly where you're meant to be." Coffee, confessions, and cracked hearts. Following week, Sarah arrived at the cafe before the sun had fully risen. The streets were quieter than usual. She sat at their table 5, and ordered 2 coffees without asking if he'd show. But somehow, Deep inside, she knew he would. She kept looking at the door every time the bell rang. At exactly 8:03 a.m., he walked in. This time, his eyes didn't search. They landed on her right away. He walked over with that same calmness, that same quiet warmth that had become oddly familiar now. "I hope I'm not late," he said with a soft smile. "Only by a week," she teased. He sat down and looked at the cup already waiting for him. "You remembered how I like it," he said. "I don't forget the quiet things," she replied. They sipped their drinks in silence for a moment. There was something heavier in the air today. Not uncomfortable, but real. Finally, she asked, "How do you stay so kind?" He looked surprised by the question. He stirred his coffee slowly before answering. "Because I've seen what happens when people give up on kindness." He paused, then added, "I lost someone once, someone who was the kindest person I knew. She kept giving, even when no one gave back. And when the world got too loud, she left." Sarah didn't ask who. She didn't need to. The sadness in his voice said everything. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded, as if accepting the sorrow without fighting it. Then she spoke. "I lost my mom 2 years ago. Cancer." His eyes met hers, and they both understood each other in a way words couldn't explain. "She was my safe place." Sarah continued, "When she died, the world felt too loud for me too. I stopped writing, stopped dreaming, stopped believing anything beautiful would happen again." He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. It wasn't romantic. It was human. A quiet, steady connection in a world that often moved too fast. "But you're here," he said, "and you let a stranger sit at your table." She smiled. "I guess I was tired of being alone." "Me too." They began meeting more often. Every Monday and Thursday. Same table. Same time. Sometimes they talked about deep things, pain, love, loss. Other times, they shared stories that made them laugh so hard tears ran down their faces. He told her about his motorcycles. She told him about her dream of writing children's books. "You should," he said, eyes lighting up. "Your words have gentleness." "Gentleness doesn't sell," she replied. "Then the world needs more of it," he said, without hesitation. His encouragement did something to her. She started writing again, slowly, carefully, like a wound, learning how to breathe. She brought her first news story to him. It was about a lost boy and a quiet dog who found each other on a rainy street. He read it twice. Then he looked up with tears in his eyes. "This is beautiful," he said. Her heart felt full for the first time in years. One day, he arrived looking different. Dressed in a sharp black suit, no beanie, no backpack. Like the world knew who he was again. She raised an eyebrow. "Big event." He nodded. "Charity dinner. I almost canceled, but I didn't want to miss this." "You're showing up in a tux just to sit here with me?" she asked, laughing. "I'd show up in anything to sit here with you," he said, quietly. Her laughter stopped. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, she felt something stir. Something more than friendship. He noticed it too, but neither of them said anything, because sometimes feelings are best handled with patience. Later that evening, after he left, a woman came to her table. An older woman, soft eyes, warm smile. "You know who he is, right?" she asked. Sarah nodded. "Then you also know. He doesn't let many people close." "I didn't plan any of this," Sarah said. "I just gave him a seat." The woman smiled kindly. "Sometimes the smallest doors open the biggest paths." That night, Sarah sat at her desk. Her story was finished. Not the book, her own story. The one about grief, about stillness, about unexpected meetings in unexpected places. She wrote a single line at the top of the page. It started with a seat. "But what he gave me was space to breathe again." And deep in her chest, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The photo that broke everything. These turned into weeks. And for Sarah, those mornings with Keanu felt like a new life. Not just because he was someone the world knew, but because he made her feel unknown in a good way, free from judgment, free to feel again, to write, to smile, to exist without hiding. They never defined what they were. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it also wasn't just friendship. It was something in between. Like two souls standing quietly in the same storm, holding each other's hands without saying a word. They had routines now. She brought muffins. He brought stories. Sometimes he read her rough pages of her children's book. Sometimes she helped him practice lines for a role he didn't tell her about yet. They laughed. They shared secrets, and every time they said goodbye, it felt like a promise to return. Then came the day everything changed. It started like any other morning. Sarah was already seated at the cafe when Keanu arrived. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. She noticed something different in his walk, a quiet tension. He sat down and forced a smile. "Morning. What happened?" she asked. He pulled out his phone and placed it gently on the table. On the screen was a photo of them sitting at their table, laughing, her hand on his wrist. The caption underneath read, "Keanu Reeves spotted with mystery woman. Is he finally dating again?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Someone took it yesterday. Probably with a long lens," he said, voice low. "I should have been more careful." She stared at the screen, her heart racing. "I didn't know this would happen. I swear I didn't say anything to anyone." "I know," he said quickly. "I trust you." But she could see it, the way his shoulders tensed, the way his voice was just a little more guarded. "What happens now?" she asked, trying to steady herself. "Paparazzi might start showing up. Maybe not here, but they'll try to follow me. Maybe you too." Sarah looked out the window. Everything suddenly felt different, heavier, exposed. "I didn't sign up for this," she whispered. He reached out. "I'll make sure you're protected. I promise." She didn't pull away, but she didn't speak either, because deep down, a quiet fear had begun to bloom. She liked the man, not the name, not the world around the name. That afternoon, the cafe owner, a kind older man named Marco, gently approached her. "Sarah," he said softly, "I don't want to lose regulars or become some place where photographers gather." She understood. "Too well, I won't be coming as often," she said, heartbreaking. "I get it." He nodded sadly. "You're a good soul. I hope it doesn't scare you away from the joy you found." That night, Sarah received a message from an unknown number. "You're Keanu's girlfriend, right? I just saw your photo. Lucky girl." She blocked it. But then came another and another. People digging up her old posts, screenshots of her walking near the cafe, photoshopped images, made up rumors. The internet had swallowed her quiet life whole. She called Keanu. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey," he said gently, "I don't know if I can do this." She admitted, her voice trembling. He didn't argue, didn't plead. He just said, "Then we stop. Right now, if it's hurting you. We stop. I don't want you to lose yourself because of me." She stayed silent for a while. Then asked, "And what about you?" "I'll be okay," he replied, though his voice cracked ever so slightly. "But you matter more." The next morning, she didn't go to the cafe acute. Neither did he. For 3 days, silence. No texts, no calls, just the ache of something unfinished. On the 4th day, a package arrived at her door. No name, no return address. Inside was a notebook. The first page read, "When the world becomes too loud, write until it's quiet again." She pressed the notebook to her chest and wept. She went back to the cafe once. Just once. And table 5 was empty. She sat there alone, staring at the door, hoping. But he didn't come. And she understood. Their world, what they had, cracked. Not because of who he was, but because of the noise that came with it. And yet, something inside her whispered, "The story isn't over yet." The last page of 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence, no texts, no calls. The cafe still opened. Each morning, the jazz still played, and the rain still visited the window panes like it always had. But for Sarah, time felt frozen. She walked past table 5 a few times, never sat, just kept moving. The messages from strangers had slowed. The world had found something else to gossip about. But the weight it left on her chest hadn't moved. She had started writing again, not for money, not for anyone else, just to survive. She wrote in the notebook Keanu gave her, each page filled with moments they had shared, quiet, warm, real. One afternoon, while walking through Central Park, she saw a man sitting alone on a bench, looking down at a folded piece of paper. Her heart skipped. It was him. Keanu. He looked up as she approached. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them faded. "Hi," she said gently. His lips parted in a quiet breath, like he hadn't known how much he missed her voice until that second. "I was hoping I'd see you again," he said. She sat beside him. They didn't hug, didn't cry. They just breathed together for a while. In the middle of a noisy city. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Getting there." "I missed you," he said, his voice low. "But I didn't want to pull you back into the mess. It wasn't the fame," she said. "It was the fear of being swallowed by it." He looked down. "I know. But then I realized something," she said. "You didn't choose that world for attention. You chose it to tell stories, to make people feel less alone." He slowly turned toward her. "That's what I've always tried to do." She held up the notebook he had given her. "So did I." He smiled, a deep, full smile that reached his eyes. "Did you finish the book?" he asked. "Almost," she said. "But the ending, I was waiting to see how it really ends." He leaned back, watching the sky through the tree branches. "Maybe it doesn't end," he said. "Maybe it just becomes something else." They sat quietly. Then she turned toward him. "Do you think we can try again?" Slowly. "No café, no photos, just walks and books and muffins." He nodded. "No pressure, no labels. Just moments, real ones," she added. "Always," he said. A month later, her book was published. Not by a big company, not with glossy pages. Just a small release through a local press. She didn't even put her name on the cover. Just a title, "The Man Who Just Needed a Seat." The dedication read, "To the stranger who reminded me how to breathe again." Keanu never promoted it, but he bought 20 copies, gave them to shelters, to libraries. Two kids who didn't know who Sarah was, but found something quiet and powerful in the pages. He visited her every week, sometimes at her apartment, sometimes in the park, always without bodyguards, cameras, or noise. Just Keanu. Just Sarah. And every time they parted, he said the same thing: "Thank you for the seat." Years later, when people asked Sarah about the time she met Keanu Reeves, she never told them the full story, not because it was a secret, but because some stories aren't meant to be told for fame. Some stories are meant to be lived, quietly, deeply, and with grace. And as for Table 5, it stayed open, sometimes for strangers, sometimes for someone just needing a quiet moment, and every now and then for two souls who knew what it meant to truly see each other.